The contact appeared on my board at 0611, 40 minutes into a sweep sortie that had no reason to be interesting. I was running port low off Ian's Pale Dominion's 4 escort formation. Standard triangle +1. Carrier holding its lane 800 kilometers behind me while the escorts held their spread. My job was perimeter confirmation, ping the edges of the fleet corridor, log the return signatures, come home in 90 minutes with nothing to report. 11 times in the Kesher transit. 12 was supposed to look the same. The contact didn't squawk wrong. Its IFOF returned clean. Terran military, escort class, friendly. The transpond string was formatted correctly down to the last checksum digit. I flagged it anyway, because something in the return geometry was off in a way I couldn't name. Sensor officers have a phrase for it. Wrong, kind of right. The contact's mass return was within variance for a wedge-class escort, but the profile distribution didn't match any frame in my onboard library. Flew like an escort. The numbers said escort. But the shape of the numbers was the shape of something else wearing an escort's clothes. Keyed the wing channel. Pale control, Dross. I have a supplemental contact, bearing 275, range 40 clicks, squawking friendly. Quest confirmation against formation manifest. The reply came back in 11 seconds. Standard delay. Dross, pale control. Formation manifest shows 4 escorts in position. You are seeing an echo. I continued the sweep. At Ozo 629, the contact moved. It didn't drift and it didn't adjust course. It moved with the precision of a pilot who knew exactly where he was, settling into position 200 meters off my starboard quarter, matching my heading and speed to within a decimal. I watched it hold there for 40 seconds, and I did not key the wing channel again, because I was not seeing the geometry of what I was looking at, and I needed 30 seconds to finish the thought. Formation manifest showed 4 escorts. I could see 4 escorts on my board, holding their assigned positions around the carrier. The contact was a 5th. It had been a 5th from the moment it appeared. What had changed was that it was no longer content to observe from a distance. It had moved to fly with me. I kept my hands off the firing controls and my voice off the emergency channel, which was either the calmest decision I ever made or the stupidest. In the moment, it felt like the same thing. I keyed pale control on a secondary frequency, spoke at a normal volume, and reported exactly what I saw. This time the reply took 40 seconds. When it came, it was the captain's voice, not the controller's. Dross, do not maneuver. Hold your heading. We're seeing it too. What Pale Dominion was seeing, as I would learn later, 3 additional contacts materializing from nothing. Not decloaking, not emerging from debris cover, not jumping in, but resolving from background noise the way a face resolves, from static when you've been staring long enough and your brain finally assembles the pattern. They had been there. The carrier's sensors had simply not had the correct filter to distinguish their return signatures from ambient corridor interference, because their return signatures had been designed carefully, over time, to sit precisely at the threshold of detection, not below it where absence becomes suspicious, precisely at it where presence becomes invisible. 4 contacts, holding the escort positions the Pale Dominion's own formation had established. Port, starboard, forward high, aft low. They had slotted themselves into the gaps between our escorts and held there, matching velocities, matching headings, running cold. In my formation of 9, 4 were Terran and 4 were not, and I was the 9th, flying alongside one of the 4 that were not, and neither of us had fired on the other. I want to be clear about what I felt in that moment, because I've been asked about it many times since, and I've given clean professional answers in the debriefs and the review sessions. What I felt was not fear and it was not wonder. It was the particular flatness that comes when a situation exceeds your training and you find yourself running on instincts so old it predates your Gorn. Training. I checked my instruments. I checked my fuel load. I checked the contact 200 meters off my starboard quarter, which was flying with the steadiness of a machine or something very like a machine, and I held my heading. At 0641, Pale Dominion fired. 1 round. Ranging shot from the port secondary battery. Not a volley, not a targeting solution, not an opening broadside. A single slug, calculated to pass between 2 of the contacts with a margin of 400 meters on either side. The carrier's gunnery officer told me afterward that the captain had signed off on it in 6 seconds, which is not a fast decision, and is not a slow decision, but is exactly the decision you make when you need to say something that isn't a word. The contacts did not return fire. They did not maneuver. They held their positions and they held their silence. And the carrier held its position and held its silence. And I held my heading with the contact on my starboard quarter until 0653, when my fuel state required a return to the barn, and I RTB'd and sat in my cockpit on the flight deck for 4 minutes before anyone came to debrief me. The hail came through 17 minutes after I landed, not on a military frequency and not in any encoding standard in our library, in clear Terran standard, grammatically correct, without accent, without hesitation. The entity, the transmission, introduced itself as a representative of something that translated roughly as the Vareth succession. It did not apologize for the contact. It did not explain its origins. It said 3 things. That the succession had been present in this corridor for a long time, that the formation mirroring had been intentional, and that it had been a gesture. The captain's response was logged in the record as 11 words. I won't quote it here, because it belongs to her, but it was 11 words and it contained no threats and no welcomes and no promises. And the Vareth succession did not reply for 3 days. In those 3 days, the contacts remained in position. Our escorts held their positions. The carrier held its lane. 2 more sweeps, and the contact flew with me, both times, 200 meters off my starboard quarter, and I held my heading, and it held its position, and neither of us spoke. On the 3rd day, the succession transmitted again, a longer message. A representative crossed to the carrier in a vessel that was, from the outside, visually indistinguishable from a standard Terran courier shuttle, and I was told afterward that the interior was nothing like any Terran vessel, though I was not part of that meeting. What came out of the meeting was not a treaty in any conventional sense. No territory was ceded. No fleet access was exchanged. What was established was a set of mutual acknowledgments and a communications protocol and a designation. The Kesher corridor would be logged as a contact zone, jointly maintained, jointly observed. The succession's representative, before departing, transmitted 1 additional message that was made available to the full crew. The formation mirroring, it explained, had taken the succession approximately 230 years to develop. They had studied Terran fleet doctrine from a distance for that long, studying sensor returns, tracking formation geometries, mapping the logic of how Terran military units held position relative to one another, and had replicated it as precisely as they were able. The intent had been to approach in a form that was recognizable as non-threatening in specifically Terran terms. Not silence, not distance, not display of their own capabilities, but imitation of our doctrine, which in their framework was the most explicit form of deference available to them. What they had watched for during the approach was how Pale Dominion responded when it confirmed what it was actually looking at. Whether the captain launched the full battery, whether she ordered evasive action, whether she broadcast a hostile contact alert on the emergency frequencies, which would have brought 2 additional carrier groups through from the transit corridor in approximately 4 hours. She had fired 1 round, a ranging shot, and then she had held her position and her silence. The succession representative said that this was, in their framework, the only acceptable answer, and that they had not been certain humanity was capable of it. 230 years of study, and the 1 data point they had not been able to model was what a Terran captain would do in 6 seconds, with 4 unidentified CACs in her escort formation and a single shot available to her. I've thought about that a lot in the time since. About the 6 seconds. About what it means to be watched for 2 centuries by something patient enough to learn the shape of how you hold your ships in space, and careful enough to ask question without words, and disciplined enough to wait for an answer that might not come. We were not what they expected. Not because we were stronger than they calculated, or faster or better armed. Because we held.